What I came down to as I developed the art of communication, and it's broken down into different sections, like the 3 human intrinsics, the 5 elements of the communicator, and then the 7 frequencies of communication. And the 7 frequencies of communication are what I would identify as 7 signature frequencies that are most common and in communication. And they're not at the same level of frequency. Mm-hmm. Some of them are more common, some of them are more rare. And so if I were just kind of walk through maybe the more common frequency to the more rare frequency, I think the most common frequency, at least on social media, is the motivator. And I love motivators, and I like listening to them. But motivators love to inspire you. They love to encourage you. They're never going to say probably anything negative in their talk,
right?
You know, and they're never going to call you out or challenge you or confront you about anything you've done wrong. But they are going to fill you with so much value and sense that I can do this, whatever it is. And I think that most pastors fall into one of 2 categories. And I think motivators is one of them, where their hope is to inspire people, to help them believe that God is for them, and I think sometimes they're seen as on the negative, like maybe superficial or not as deep, and it's because they're not trying to get into the mud. And maybe someone like a Joel Osteen would be like a motivator.
Say, let's give an example of someone who'd be a classic communicator.
I think Joel Osteen on the big scale, and I think Chad Veach. I love Chad Veach.
Yeah, Chad here in LA.
Right, Chad Veach is a motivator. He inspires you, he encourages you. You feel like he loves you, right? And he's for you, and he likes me. He doesn't know me, but he likes me. Yeah. And it's not just what he says. Before Chad Veach opens his mouth, there's a frequency that lets you know I'm for you. And he inspires, he encourages, and motivators, I think, are the most liked oftentimes.
Yep.
And it's the most frequent, I think, frequency on social media because people so desperately need motivation in life and need to be encouraged. And I remember one time my sister, Lee, she said, I like Joel Osteen and he's my happy pill. And what she meant by that was, I get depressed a lot. I have a hard life. I go through a lot of brutal stuff. I turn on Joel Osteen, I just feel inspired.
Is that also your friend John Gordon? Would you put him in the...
I put John Gordon in, yes, I do put him in a motivator category. And that's lets you see that motivators can be different.
Yeah.
Right? Because Joel will be different than Chad, will be different than John. John is so much a guy who wants to motivate and inspire, which is interesting because he will tell you he was the most negative, pessimistic person in the world. But he reversed it by becoming positive.
Yep. At what, 29 or so? Yep. He converted to Christianity, and then I think shortly after that, his wife is like, "You're so negative."
I led John to faith.
He talks about that.
Yeah,
it's
it was
really
fun.
Powerful.
And
we're
best friends now.
Yeah.
And I see him as a motivator. And he inspires, he encourages, he brings enthusiasm, he brings hope into the room. And right next to a motivator, but not the same as a challenger.
Okay.
And now a challenger is that person that they see everyone as someone who needs to be called out and called up. A challenger, for them, things are never good enough. It's great that you did that, but you should have done that.
Hey, let's talk.
The challenger's the football coach. You're winning, 28-0, and at halftime he's chewing you out because you missed this block and you dropped this pass and you missed this read, and they're just constantly moving toward improvement. And I also think there are a lot of challengers on Instagram and challengers in social media, challengers. Not as many challengers as much as pastors as much, because I think because of the nature of culture, people in the church are afraid to challenge.
So who would be like some challengers? I'm thinking Alex Hormozy.
I don't know.
Do you know Alex?
No, I don't.
No, anyway, it could be my buddy Mark Clark. I don't know whether you know Mark. He would be a challenger. He's at Bayside these days, but incredible communicator.
Very, very cool. There's this guy on Instagram called, I think, the Hip Hop Preacher.
Oh, yeah. I think I follow him.
And he is such a challenger. He's the guy that goes, "You owe you." And it's almost like he's mad at you, but he's mad at you because he believes in you.
Right.
And both my kids and my wife all have a little challenger and a lot of challenger in them. And so they're always letting me know how I can improve, how I can do better, and how I can step up as a dad. It's always great to have that in my life. And and then next to a challenger, and each one of them has a shadow side too, by the way.
Okay.
And so
is it worth going into?
Like the shadow side of a motivator is a performer. And that's why a lot of times young Christian preachers are so much performers. It's because their natural frequency is motivator, but they haven't developed that and found confidence in it. So they're performing. And that's where sometimes you can feel like, I feel a disconnect. I don't know if they're really inspiring me or needing to be inspired by this moment.
What about the challenger's shadow side?
The shadow side of the challenger is manipulator. Because when the challenger's frequency is healthy, they're getting you to do what you need to do, to find the courage to take on your task, your dream, your challenge. But when they're working from their shadow, they're using their challenger to get you to do what they want you to do. And you can feel this overwhelming, oppressive weight on you that I have to do this because this person is demanding it of me.
Yeah.
And then next to the challenger would be a commander.
Okay.
And the challengers and commanders are different. A challenger calls you out, but a commander tells you what to do. And what's interesting about the commander frequency to me is that it's a frequency that needs to be used more rarely, but some people use it all the time. And they don't even know how to ask a question without command. It always comes as a command.
Is that more older generation, large and in charge?
I wish.
Command style? No, you still see it.
I'll tell you, my wife's number one frequency is command.
Okay.
My son, Aaron's, his number of frequency is command.
Got it.
My daughter, Mariah, her number one frequency is command. But they also have complementary frequency. Like Aaron has two number one frequencies, command and seer, which we'll come to later. And Mariah has two high frequencies of command and maven. And so they have different textures of it. But what's really funny is when they'll send you a text, like Aaron was sending a text to one of the guys on team going, he said like something like, send me a photo. And he adds, please, I'm trying to not use my commander frequency. And the other guy said, I'm a commander too. I love the language.
I get it.
Don't
It's
add
clear.
words.
Okay.
And I'll come home we came to Mosaic on Sunday, and right before we got out of the car, I parked the car, and my wife goes, turn off the car. And I looked at her, I said, you've been gone for 2 weeks to Africa. I was turning off the car every day.
I survived, believe it or not.
But it's funny. I'll joke about it. She'll say, "Take out the garbage," and I say, "I know it means I love you." And once people began to realize they have this commander frequency, my son will actually tell me, "Dad, I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas and a bunch of suggestions. They're all going to come out like commands." But I want you to know they're not commands, they're just ideas and suggestions. And it has transformed our communication.
Wow.
Okay? Because when you can help a commander, because if you're going into a burning building, you want a commander.
Yeah.
You don't want someone who needs consensus or team building.
Right.
You just want someone who knows what to do and does it. If you're at sea in a ship, you want a commander who knows how to get through a storm. Command is important when you need someone to be in charge. I think like Bill Belichick from the Patriots would be command. Do your job. That's the theme of the Patriots. Do your job. It's not very inspiring, except that when you're a commander, it's so clear.
Well, and it worked.
Yeah.
For many years.
Right. Do your job. It's very, very simple. And you see commanders out in the space, but sometimes what happens is you start feeling like, wait a minute, this person just keeps telling me, and after a while it gets too hard.
Yeah.
And I try to tell commanders, look, if you're a commander at work, make sure you don't go home and remain a commander with your wife and your kids. If you have a little 5 or 6 year old daughter or 10-year-old son, and all you're using is command, you're going to just use it, devastate their spirit. And so with commanders, I try to help them find a complementary frequency that they can use, and because everyone doesn't just have one frequency.
Yeah.
And then outside of commander, there's a healer. There's a healing frequency. I think a lot of pastors of small churches have a healing frequency.
Yeah.
And so for them, it isn't about how many people in the room. It's about how much healing and help and hope I can bring to people in the room.
Sort of shepherding, caregiver, that kind of vibe.
But not always. Do you know who Lewis Howes is?
Oh, yeah, I know Lewis.
Lewis and I have become really good friends.
Awesome.
I love Lewis. And I saw him here at Mosaic just a few weeks ago, and I said, Lewis, you are completely a healer frequency. And he put his hand on my chest. He goes, thank you so much.
Oh.
And you could just feel like he just loved the fact that he was seen. And if you listen to his podcast, it's called The Summit of Greatness. But
Yeah.
It really should be called The Summit of Healing.
You're right. He's always in how to get better, how to improve, how to
get over your wounds, how to get past your hurts, and how to deal with, childhood trauma. His whole frequency is one of healing, but it's called the Summit of Greatness, because for him, greatness is in bringing healing to the world, and that is so completely his frequency. And then there's a professor frequency, which deals with data and facts. When you have a professor frequency, it's about the transmission of truth, transmission of information. And I also think a lot of pastors, or actually academics, who find the one job they can have is pastoring, but they would rather be at a university. And I remember when I was in England, I think they did a study that out of 25,000 Lutheran pastors, only 22 of them identified themselves as having had a born-again experience with Jesus.
Whoa.
And what you find is that people go to become a pastor the same way someone goes to become a lawyer. Because if you're academic and if you love the transference of information, if you love learning and then transferring that learning, that's your frequency.
Okay, so that's a professor.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then there's two lesser common frequencies. One would be the seer, which what we oftentimes would call the visionary. And seers, one of the things you do know about a seer is that seers tend to erase lines of possibilities. They elevate your sense of who you can become, of the world that can be created, of the possibilities, and they're super integrated to the future. In fact, seers have a hard time remembering the past or being in the present, and they're still always talking about tomorrow, always talking about tomorrow. And I have a real strong seer frequency, and a lot of times my wife's like, could you just be present? And my mind just races into the future really quickly, and I can't help it. That's just the frequency at which I live and think and go. And then the seventh frequency is something called a maven. And this is the most rare frequency. And I had to be perfectly frank, it was the last frequency I was able to identify. And a lot of it was because as I was working through the frequencies, I was actually trying to combine some frequencies and trying to find ways to, narrow it down. But I got rid of frequencies when a frequency covered it. Yeah. And I said, okay, no, these stand alone. And so I thought, well, isn't a maven like a seer? But it's not. I remember maybe 10 years ago, someone asked me, like, what motivates you? And I remember just blurting out, I live to violate your view of reality. And that was the most honest statement I've ever made about my communication.
And is that maven?
Yeah.
Really?
Mavens aren't really casting a vision for the future. They are deconstructing your view of reality. And I remember, oh my gosh, probably 15 years ago, I was in Australia and Planet Shakers asked me to speak in Melbourne. They picked me up in the car and I'm driving to the event and they said, hey, just so you can know, people are so excited you're here and whenever you speak truth, everyone will just start cheering and clapping. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they go, whenever you speak truth, the crowd, the audience is just going to be with you. Everyone's going to just explode. It's really exciting. And I said, do you mean that every time I say something that they already believe, they're going to cheer and clap? They go, yes. I said, yeah, that isn't really my experience.
That is evangelical culture.
Yeah. I said, my experience is when I say my most important statements, the room goes quiet. And they're not sure if I'm right. And they're not sure if they should agree, but they think they agree. And I create that tension of disbelief and belief. And there are fewer people who do that, and it's a disruptive frequency. And it hasn't always been something I was aware of. And the reason I didn't identify it is because I couldn't see it because it was me.
Right.
I could see the other frequencies because I could see them in other people. So clearly, the hardest thing to see is who you are.
So you're a maven and a seer?
Yeah, I think in clusters. I think I'm a maven, seer, challenger.
Right.
These are the three that are probably most dominant. And then I have this fourth that is a healer. And And what is, I think, odd for people is that when I'm speaking on a regular basis here, they experience a healing frequency when I'm speaking. At the same time, they're experiencing a maven frequency.
Right.
And so there are two frequencies happening at the same time, and that's what creates the dissonance. I can give you an example of a few, like when I listen to Ed Milet.
Yeah.
I think he has commander and healer.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so both frequencies are happening at the same time, and so it creates this incredible dynamic because he's commanding you, so you know he has authority. You just believe that he can tell you what to do. And
he's
you
like
want
Mr.
him to tell you what to do. Yeah. But at the same time, there's this healing frequency where he feels like he cares about you and he wants you to get better and he knows your pain, and they're happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And I've listened to several people along the way, and in fact, I've watched. You ever watch on TikTok or Instagram where somebody gets a clip from someone else and their own clip, and a clip from someone else and their own clip? What's really fascinating is you watch someone trying to imitate someone who actually has a frequency, and you can see the dissonance in the frequency. And it's not that they're being dishonest; they're just using a different frequency. I watched someone do this with Oprah, and Oprah was speaking from such a powerful healer frequency. It was so authentic and so a part of her essence. And then the person slipped to their clip saying something similar. It's completely a motivator. No healer at all.
Wow.
And
you're right.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, one of the things that excites me at this is that once we designed the 7 frequencies, we couldn't unsee them.
Yeah.
And once I started teaching it to our team, it became like the common language and people being seen and understood and knowing how to communicate with each other so much better. One of the things is I was working with someone, they thought they were a motivator, and it was their number 7.
That's going to be painful, trying to work your way into that.
Yeah, and this guy is, he probably makes 10 to 20 million a year.
Wow.
So he's super successful. But he thought he was a motivator, but he actually is not. And that's why he ends up with this back end problem of people who feel really discouraged. Because what he thought is a motivator frequency was actually a challenger frequency. And I realized, I've done that a million times, where I thought I was motivating people and I was actually challenging them, or I was casting vision, but I wasn't motivating them. And my team would come to me and go, hey, we really would love for you to tell us like what we're doing great. And I realized, I hold great at a really high standard. And so it's hard for me to say you're doing this great.
Right.
But a motivator, they see everything as great.
Everything's wonderful. Thank you.
You didn't spill the coffee.
Way to go.
You're crushing it. And I had to actually learn the pattern of identifying what people are doing well. And I would say, great job, great job. I thought that was a motivator frequency. That is not a motivator frequency. Great job, great job. And my team came back and said, we don't believe you. Because when we ask you, which job did we do that was great? I'd go, all of it.
Yeah, it's great. Great job. Thank you.
And they go, we'll believe you when you identify something specific that we're doing great. And it has, for me, created so many different dynamics, realizing when something isn't your frequency, you probably think you're using it when you're not. And here I think is the more powerful thing. If you can pay attention to other people's frequencies and realize that people hear from different frequencies, and they don't always hear from the frequency from which they speak. I think one of the millennial challenges is that a lot of millennials speak from commander, but they hear from healer.
Okay. Say more about that. So they speak commander. How does that show up in millennials?
They feel it's their right to tell you what's wrong with you.
Yeah. I'm going to make a pronouncement now about the world, about you, about the future, and...
Yeah. Let's just pick an issue. Let's say like climate change.
Yep.
Right? It's a good one, And so if a millennial will start talking to you about climate change, they won't talk to you. They might yell at you about it.
Right. And they'll say, is that T-shirt sustainable? How much meat are you eating?
And then I'll say, was that T-shirt made by children in slavery?
Yeah.
And because you paid so little for it.
Uh-huh.
And then they'll go, what? You can't speak command back to command. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, because they're very sensitive.
That's right, because they speak from a commander frequency, but they hear from a healer frequency. And the temptation is, I'm gonna return hammer for hammer. I'm gonna return challenger for challenger. I'm returning commander for commander, but you're going, no, what I have to do is I have to receive this commander and return, let's say, seer, give him a bigger picture of the world and reality.
So what do you do if you're a commander and you're generally speaking to a lot of people who need healing? Like, you think about the church, disproportionate number of people, like overrepresented, the number of people who are in crisis, transition, challenging season of life. That's when you go back to church. It's just usually been true. A lot of wounding there, sometimes by the church, sometimes by life.
Yeah.
You tend to be a challenger, you tend to be a commander, but the people you're speaking to, their receptive mode is they need some healing. What do you do with that?
I think this is a really important question.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into specifics, but some of the biggest church systems in the world have collapsed over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And a huge part of it is because they were commander frequencies. Singularly commander frequencies. And you would think that people who need a healer frequency wouldn't go to churches that have a commander frequency, but they do, because they're so broken that they're willing to be told what to do. But they're not getting healed.
Wow.
And then and the problem with the commander frequency is that you cannot allow there to be a violation of trust. Because to have a commander frequency, you have to have authority and respect and trust.
Yeah.
And the moment you lose respect and trust, that commander frequency then is seen as dictatorial. Because the shadow side of a commander is a dictator. And so you have people who flood to commander cultures who actually need healing.
Wow.
Because
we can do an hour on that.
Because they get told what to do, and when you're broken, you don't want the responsibility of making your own decisions. So you abdicate that and let someone else make decisions for you. And that way, if it goes bad, you can blame someone else.
Oh, man.
So there's a lot there.
You just really rocked my world. Like, you know, one of those insights where so much just flashes before your eyes at once. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
it's also why sometimes when there are pastors in large systems who have like a moral failure or have a financial failure or have, just some kind of failure, and maybe it's not as pronounced as you would think, but there's no grace for them. It's because commander frequency, it creates respect, but it doesn't create love. And so the moment that respect's gone, there is no love to catch you.
Oh, man.
And one of the things you have to really consider when you're leading people is, are you leading with love and respect?
How do you do that?
I actually think that's the most intentional aspect of leadership. I sign so many of my notes, love and respect, when I write to people. And it's really, for me, based around, I will not use my power for my good, but for the good of the whole, for the good of others. I actually think that's the love part. The love is, I don't lead because I have a psychological need to lead. I lead because, for whatever reason, God's given me some skills, gifts, or abilities to help people live a better life. And then the respect part is living a life that matches what you say. And there's an assessment I use with a lot of high-level people called the Berkman.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. We'll have to do it together someday.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Okay. Yeah. And one of the things that I can identify in it is a couple of interesting things. One is how much energy a person uses to create a persona rather than allow people to see their authentic selves.
Yeah.
But another thing I can actually see is how much you need to win versus win-win, win-lose, and lose-win. How much you need to be at an advantage.
Gotcha.
And across the board, 99% of everyone I've ever graphed has a extremely what's called a high advantage. but their perception is that they're low advantage.
Oh.
So their perception is, I'm willing to lose. I'm willing to let you have the better end. But it's only the inner story we tell ourselves. We actually always intend to win.
Desperately want to win.
And one of the great, I think, insights I had in my own life is that when I first went through this like a decade ago, that's one of the places where I'm actually the reverse. And when the consultant called me when I first went through from Germany, he said, you actually have what's called a low advantage. My perception is the number is like a 16 out of 99. So I perceive that I wouldn't really take advantage of people, but my actual number is an 8. And so he said, this is like so rare that we need to walk you through this because you'll let people take advantage of you all your life.
And this goes back to what we talked about before. You're always paying the bill.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I do remember
Part
that.
of the conversation?
Yeah.
And I've thought about that. I've been letting occasionally people pick up the check from time to time.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a low advantage person, the downside is you don't even realize you might be unhealthy as a lose-win relationship person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the upside is you would never take advantage of anyone.
Yeah.
And what you have to like realize that is happening a lot of times is that we live in a cultural environment where we're raised to have an advantage. The reversal isn't the normative. So when I talk to someone who is like let's say a 1695, and they go, wait a minute, am I really like this? And I go, here's the good news. That's what humans look like.
Yeah.
You know, you're not an aberration. This is the norm.
Right.
Something has to like glitch somewhere along the way for you not to be like that. Yeah. But when you become aware of that, you realize, I'm always going to perceive as if I'm losing, even though if I'm winning. And when you go back to like millennials in the conversation, and you look at the 7 frequencies, one of the challenges is that we actually don't even know our full intention when we're communicating. And so let's say you're high advantage, but you have a low advantage perception. You're communicating as if you're a low advantage, but what a person's sensing in your frequency is the high advantage, and they can't figure out why. Now imagine that on a platform when you go to pastors and leaders who have massive collapses. You're communicating service, you're communicating sacrifice, you're communicating humility, you're communicating all these virtues, and you expect everyone to live them out. But somehow the subtext is, but not you.
That I'm the exception to the rule?
I'm the exception to the rule because of how God chose me to be this person.
To be the leader.
Yeah.
Wow.
And once you see yourself as the exception to the rule of all the virtues of Jesus, you're in real trouble. Mm-hmm. But the problem is you often don't see it. And then everyone around you affirms your distorted view because of your talent. And it for me is a really critical issue. I know we keep leaving communication and talking about all these other issues, but I think communication is in many ways, it's like the organism that touches everything we do in human life.
And it's how most people access you.
Yeah.
In these large organizations, large churches, large companies, how do people access you? They access you through Sunday morning, through your keynote addresses, through your talks, through your public communication. So if you're in that situation, high command people, high need for love, healing in the congregation, and let's say you don't have a double life. Let's say there's no hidden affair, there's nothing, because honestly, that's probably the vast majority of cases.
Yeah,
I know we don't.
The exception is the mess.
Yeah, the exception is the headline. The exception is the rule. But I imagine there are people here who would be like, okay, if I did your assessment, I'm high command. We have a younger church, high need for healing, to listen in the healing mode. Is that just a trap destined to catch people? Is a bomb ready to go off, or how do you navigate that?
No, I think that Mosaic would have been probably so better served if I had been more of a commander.
Oh, really?
In fact, if you listen to both my kids, they would absolutely agree. And they said, there have been many times, Dad, where you should have just told us. And instead of trying to just inspire us or grow us or or challenge us, because there are times people just need the clarity of command.
Right.
And it is true. But I would say that it's so rare that I've used that particular frequency, that in 38 years of marriage and 34 years that Aaron's been alive and 31 years that Mariah's been alive, they've almost never seen me use command in their life. And one time Mariah came to me and said, I just need you to tell me what to do. Don't be Yoda. I don't need you to be a sage. I just need you to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And then I started asking questions. And I'm just not designed like that. When I think I'm commanding, I'm actually inquiring.
Right.
But I do think that you can command effectively. You can command well, but you need as a team of people who have other frequencies. You need a team with someone has a healer frequency and someone has a motivator frequency. In fact, one of the things we've realized at Mosaic is we need more motivator frequencies who are being used on our platforms. And because, Aaron is like a visionary seer commander, and Mariah is like this very, very mavenish kind of challenger. And I feel them as motivators. But when you listen to a real motivator, you realize, there's a massive gap. My wife, she'll get on the platform and I'll say, honey, don't tell them what to do. And she'll get there, she goes, everyone raise your hand.
Oh, wow, there you go.
She can't help it. I can't have her do the offering, but she'll go, you need to give right now. And she can get away with it because everybody loves her. And she goes to Africa and Ukraine, and she's the most courageous human being, so everybody admires her. So she has a lot of texture for command. But we don't have a lot of motivators who just inspire people. And I think some of that is probably, according to the survey of my family, it hasn't been the highest value for me. I'm so self-motivated that I don't really need that frequency in my life very much.
So if you're a commander and you're leading a church, and I think, the listening mode being a need for healing, maybe the answer is self-awareness and a more diverse platform as far as communication frequencies go.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I think that when you're a commander, you need to understand the cluster of frequencies that are available to you. And then realize that commander is, it's a spice. It's not the meal. And if you overuse it, people will stop listening to you. I listened to someone recently, and I don't want to say who it is. I love this person, but their whole talk, they were just yelling at us for 40 minutes.
It's a lot of yelling.
And it was in the business world. It wasn't in the Christian world. I'd expect a preacher to yell at me for 40 minutes, but it was a business guy just yelling at us, telling us everything that we need to do right and everything we do wrong, and how to, change and how to make the difference. And it was like putting my head into a fire hydrant. I'm going, I need the water, but I can't drink this. And so I feel like there's a huge need for self-awareness there. But I also feel that my experience is people who have a commander frequency usually have a high level of intelligence. It's just that they haven't actualized their emotional intelligence at the level that they need to. And I think this is an important note. It's Carol Dweck who wrote Mindset. Phenomenal book, right? Incredible. And 7 Frequencies is completely built on a growth mindset. It's not built on a fixed mindset. Okay. When you look at personality assessments or the Enneagram, you're a 9 or you're a 5 or you're a 4, and that's who you are. If you look at the Myers-Briggs, you're an ENFJ or an ISTP, and that's who you are. And this is a growth mindset. You have a core frequency, but the aspirational goal is to be able to actualize all 7 frequencies as an elite communicator. And so you may have a 7th frequency, but you should be able to pull that frequency up whenever you need it. And I think one of the psychological places to be is, I remember when Mariah was around 14 years old, she was a musician. We were driving home one day and she said, Daddy, I think I do the same thing you do. And I said, well, what's that? She said, you said that if your message is ever going to connect to someone, it has to connect to you first. I said, yeah, I said that. And she goes, I know that if a song is going to connect to anyone, it has to connect to me first. And I looked at her and I said, how can you understand this at 14 when I can't get all the pastors who get this. See, frequencies are not about trying to get people to feel something. It's about getting in touch with your own inner world and feelings. And then when you actualize that, the room connects to it.
Okay, so because I've wanted to ask this question now because we had talked about it earlier, but authenticity.
Yeah.
So people can discover their natural communication style. Maybe they see themselves already. But I think you're right. There's a lot of imitation. There's a lot of plagiarism. Now we have ChatGPT, which can write a message for you pretty crappily. But wait till 4, 5, 6. We're in 3 right now.
Yeah.
Which I think is a whole story for a whole other day. But I'm just wondering if you see people who think, oh, I have to be a healer, or I have to be a professor, or I have to be a motivator, right? But they're not really that.
It's not going to go well.
Yeah, like what happens? Because I get a lot of leaders saying, what do I need to do to get a platform? I get that question a lot, as I'm sure you do. And I'm not sure there's anything you need to do to get a platform, but part of my advice is don't be somebody you're not.
Yeah.
Because the good news, and that's one thing I really admire about you, is, I followed you for many, many years, have known you for a number. You're pretty consistent. The message hasn't varied a whole lot, and you've taken some hits for it. But the good news is you get up every morning, you get to be Erwin, right? The way God designed you. I get up at this stage of my life, and for many years, I get to be me. It's like I'm not pretending to be somebody. These are conversations I'm genuinely interested in, love asking questions. The writing I get to do, the speaking I get to do, it kind of flows from the inside out. But I don't think that's everybody's experience.
Yeah.
And there were definitely times in my leadership where I felt like, oh, I've got to be more like Rick Warren or Andy Stanley or Christine Kane or whatever. And then I'm like, I was on, do you know John Acuff?
I just met him recently.
I love John.
Yeah, great guy.
And I've done a lot of speaking with him, and I always felt the pressure 10 years ago to be like, hey, you got to be more funny. And then I'm like, no, I'm not funny. I'm not funny like John. That's his thing, and my thing is I'll come up with the bullet points, right, or whatever. What do you do when you're not, if somebody's listening to this realizing, I don't think I'm in my authentic voice? Can you play out what the pitfall is of that, like what happens to you long term if you stay out of your lane, out of your frequency, and then what to do to become more in touch with your frequency?
Yeah, there's a lot there, because when you get paid to communicate, it changes the dynamic for you.
Yeah.
And then you're being paid by this, let's say by a church, and you're being paid in the sense, in their mind, to communicate the way they want you to communicate and say what they want you to say.
Back to the 90s, right? Where you were, right?
And one of the things you have to begin to ask yourself is, are you like a boat just bringing goods from one port to another? So it's not really about you. It's just, this is a truth, let's say, in the book of Romans, and I'm translating it to the people here, but I'm just the boat. I'm not affecting the goods.
Right.
Or am I supposed to have my own unique voice? Is it essential to me to be uniquely me, to have my own voice, that I have my own perspective? And ironically, people may fire you for that. And just realize that most churches don't hire you to be you. And they hire you to be who they want you to be.
That's so true.
And so it has less to do with communication. It has to do with sociological dynamics, and of culture. I've always just chosen to be unemployed and unique rather than employed and the same.
Yeah. I think it creates a cognitive dissonance that gets really hard to live in.
Yeah, it does.
If you're, wearing Saul's armor, if you're trying to fit into skin every week that isn't yours, or adopt a voice that isn't yours, I don't know. I would just think that would have to be exhausting.
Yeah, I think personally, you don't want to live your life being someone you're not. And you don't want to live your life giving messages that don't change you. Wow. Yeah. And so for me, a minimal criteria for any message I give is the message has to change me. Has to impact me, has to shape me, And I think a part of like becoming a more authentic voice is getting in touch with who you really are. And I'm pretty open about, my life, my world, my inner world, sometimes I know it frustrates Kim going, I wish you wouldn't say that you're that, or I wish you wouldn't say this, but I've struggled with, with OCD throughout all my life. I've struggled, I have neurological challenges I've had all my life, and I feel like it makes me more human. It helps me relate to people. And the really wonderful thing about being more human is that you have a better platform for then aspiring toward greatness. Because when you aspire toward greatness and no one sees any of your flaws and you act like you're perfect, people will almost despise the greatness in you.
Yeah. They're almost excited to see you get knocked down a peg or two.
But if people can relate to you and they feel like, there's a part of you that's the common person and you connect to everyone and you're human and down to earth, more often than not, they're going to celebrate your success. They're going to celebrate the things about you that make you unique and great. And I remember years and years ago, my brother Alex, he said to me on a phone, because we were talking about something and I was probably frustrated, and he said, Erwin, God has not called you to be original. He's called you to be effective. And I didn't realize he was quoting Rick Warren. So he wasn't being original. He was actually just being effective.
Actually, that's clever.
And I was depressed the whole week, wondering if that was true. And I remember calling him back a week later and I said, hey, Alex, I've thought about what you said. Maybe God hasn't called you to be original, but God has definitely called me to be original. But I actually think God has called us all to be original.
Yeah.
I don't think the measure is effectiveness. And I think it's being authentic and honest and true to who you are, and then allowing the effectiveness to come out of that. Like I'm smart enough to have known how to be famous in the Christian world. I just chose not to be.
Yeah.
I could have made different choices. I could have started my church in a different part of the country, in a different suburb, in a different spot. Like I can never say, oh, I just didn't know. I knew. I just chose not to.
Yeah.
I came here because I felt these people don't really have the gospel in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
I go after people who are outliers because I feel like they don't really have someone who they can connect to at a deep level. And you have to make choices and decide, I'll take that success. I'll take the success where I wake up in the morning going, yeah, I've lived my unique life. Maybe I left success on the table at a level that other people think I should have been successful. I could have written books that sold millions. I'm just bright enough to be able to do that. But I wrote books that mattered to me, and there's a difference. And you have to decide, who you do what you do for. And I think that's what I would say to pastors is, don't spend another day of your life being what other people want you to be.
Yeah. And some of that,
Yeah.
I don't know that you had this or not, but for me, I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years sort of embracing who I really am. And there's a little bit of disappointment that I've always had to get over in my 40s and 50s. It's like, yeah, you're not as funny. No, you're not as smart. No, you're not as quippy. You're not as clever. But there's also a beauty and a peace in like going, oh, okay, this is who I am, right? Like this is how I communicate. But those frequencies, Erwin, to your credit, I mean, I'm speaking here in LA tomorrow, and it's funny, I already know what I'm going to say, but thinking through the frequencies, it's helped me rethink the talk already and maybe land in a slightly more aware tone and go for the connection rather than the quote performance, because the pressure to perform never really goes away in this sphere, does it?
So let me give you a little exercise.
Yeah, sure.
We understand when a person is monotone, and we always say, change your cadence or change your intonation or change your rate of speech.
Yeah.
And those are 3 ways, right, that you can try to not be monotone. But you need to change your frequency. When I went to Lewis Howe's event, the Summit of Greatness, and spoke there, before I got on stage, I told myself, I want to really step into this healer frequency about 3/4 of the way through. But because it's not my primary frequency, I can get so much momentum that I forgot.
Right. Yeah.
So I told myself, I'm gonna do something I've never done before. And so I began the entire talk with just being so present and stepping with a healer frequency. And then I shifted to my Maven frequency, and the whole message was transformed for me. And then I did a book signing afterwards, and people just kept coming and they started weeping, going, I don't know why, but I started feeling like I was being healed.
So how did you do that? What did you do to start in your healer frequency?
I spent a few minutes, it didn't take long, to remember a moment in my life where God healed me, where I was going through pain, where I was, struggling, where I felt alone or overwhelmed, and I just connected deeply at that level. And then I stepped, and I let myself not remember it, but to live in it. Because you want it to come from the essence of who you are. Yeah. And it changed the whole way I told the opening story. It changed everything. And it was transformative. So now a lot of times I'll think in terms of, I almost think of the frequencies as if you're flying at different levels in your talk. And there's times where I have to pull back and go, I need to be a professor right now. There's truth I need to transmit from here to there. And it's not even about motivating them or challenging them or inspire them to great vision. There's just a truth that if I can just transmit this truth, it'll change their life. So there's times I have to pull back and go, it's almost like I need to slow my speedboat and make sure that this professor frequency translates the truth so they don't miss it. So every frequency has has a power that it can bring into your messaging.
Wow.